Welcome back to the worst video topic ever, part 8. This video is titled Layoff Day Prepping. And of course, the first thing that came to my mind with that is the old TV show Doomsday Preppers, where they would go and they would see how people were prepping for doomsday, right? They're building these underground bunkers and getting all this, long-term food storage and powdered food that you can, last 5 or 10 years or something like that. But those people were prepared. They were ready for the apocalypse. They were ready for the next, the third World War III. They were ready for the nuclear war, whatever devastation was on the horizon. They were ready for it. They were prepared for it. They were preppers. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we need to be layoff day preppers, maybe not doomsday, but layoff day preppers as developers in this industry. And so it's important that we kind of talk through some of these steps that you can take to prepare yourself for that time when layoffs happen. Because again, almost every company has layoffs. Every company that I have worked for has at least had one layoff, one round of layoff. Sometimes I've been laid off, sometimes I've not been laid off in those layoff processes, but almost every company in this industry as developers is going to lay people off. And so we need to be prepared, and these are some steps that'll help you do that. Step number 1 is don't bury your head in the sand. All right, we did a video earlier talking about some of the signs, reading the tea leaves of knowing when layoffs are coming. Again, you can't know perfectly necessarily all the time when layoffs are going to happen, but you need to not bury your head in your sand. Just because when things are happening around you, you can't just, get yourself in your work and ignore everything else. You need to understand what's going on in the company as much as you possibly can so that you can be prepared. If you don't know the signs that layoffs are coming, then you can't prepare for it when they do. Secondly, keep your resume up to date. Again, this may be because you see the signs that are coming, and so you want to kind of get ahead of that, and maybe you start looking before the layoffs actually happen. Or once those layoffs happen, if you're one of the casualties of the layoff, you need to have your resume updated and ready. That means that you should keep your resume updated with what you're currently doing. I generally recommend that you update it at least once a quarter. If you're starting to see some changes in the industry, you might want to update it once a month. And the reason you would update it is just to update any new information about what you're doing, anything that you've learned, any new skills that you've picked up, any new things that you've done for the company, accomplishments that you've done for the company that you're currently working for. Those are things that you want to make sure that your resume is up to date so that the moment that layoff happens, the moment you get that discussion, you can take a minute and breathe, but you can then get right on the process of applying to jobs and everything is all ready for you. Your resume is ready to go and you're ready to just jump right into it. So don't sit there with your head in the sand and keep your resume up to date. Thirdly, and this is extremely important, build and keep an emergency fund. Now, I know it seems a little bit odd for me to be talking about money when we're talking about layoffs, but one of the best defenses against a layoff is an emergency fund. Now, some of you know I've talked about Dave Ramsey before on some of my videos. There's lots of different philosophies about this, but he generally recommends a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So the idea is that you have 3 to 6 months of living expenses. You can always cut a lot of things. You can cut Netflix and Disney Plus and maybe your online subscriptions to other things. So there's a lot of things that we can often cut if necessary. So when we talk about 3 to 6 months of living expenses, that's for things like your rent or your mortgage payment. That's for your utilities. That's for your food, gas in the car payments, things like that, things that you absolutely have to have in order to live. So you want to tally up how much that is every month. And then what you want to do is save in an accessible account, not like a CD or something, like put in an accessible account, 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of savings. And that's extremely important because you don't know how long you're going to be out of work, especially at a time like this here at the beginning of 2024, the end of 2023. There's a lot of people being laid off, not a lot of people hiring. I've seen many people go 2, 3, 5, 6 months before being hired onto a new job. And this is developers who've been doing it for 4, 5, 10 years. They're having a hard time right now getting a job right away. Thankfully, I've never been out of a job for more than about a month, but that's pretty rare at the moment. Most people I'm seeing are about 2 months, and you need to have the financial stability to get you through those 2 months so you're not racking up a bunch of debt on credit cards and things like that. So one of the most important things you can do to prepare for layoff day is to build and maintain an emergency fund. If you start using emergency funds for emergencies, hopefully just for emergencies, if you start using it, replenish it as quickly as you can so that it's there when the layoff happens. The fourth way that you can prepare really goes along with this idea of keeping an emergency fund, and that is don't accept a job that doesn't give you margin. All right. So don't accept a job that's not going to give you enough margin in your income so that you can do that budgeting, so that you can do that saving to have that emergency fund. It doesn't do you any good to accept a job that just pays the bills. And if you lose that job in 6 months or a year or 2 years, you still don't have an emergency fund. Now, could you take that job, maybe find some ways to cut funds and build that emergency fund up over time? Absolutely, you can. Maybe you can pick up some side work. So I'm not saying that you can't take a job that just pays the bills. Maybe that's what you have to do. But if possible, try to only accept a new job that is going to give you margin in your budget so that you can keep that emergency fund, and make sure you keep the emergency fund. Don't just spend it on food or vacations. Okay, the last thing that you can do, and maybe the most important thing that you can do in preparing for the layoff day, is network. Now, what do I mean by network? Well, there's lots of ways that you can do this. You can network via LinkedIn. You can just get in contact with people. I know lots of people have been contacting me on LinkedIn as we've been building this channel and this community, but you can definitely build relationships and network there on LinkedIn, and oftentimes kind of see how other people are connected to people that you're connected to. Another way you can network is by going to different events locally. If you've got different events put on by companies where they're maybe doing like a lunch and learn, or they're doing some sort of like PHP gathering or JavaScript gathering or something like that, where somebody's presenting something, but they usually have an opportunity to meet other developers, maybe even meet other recruiters and things like that. So definitely network with other developers, network with other recruiters, network with just people on LinkedIn and other social media. That is extremely important, because at the end of the day, when you're looking for a job, it's more about who you know and what they have available than it is necessarily what your skills are. Of course, your skills are important to get the job, but you can't get a job that you don't know about. And that's where networking is extremely important. I want you to remember that even though layoffs are probably coming at some point in your career, you can be prepared, and it's up to you to be prepared. You can't just sit here and say, well, somebody did me wrong. Well, you have the opportunity and now the knowledge to go out there and prepare yourself and see that the layoffs are probably coming, and prepare yourself for that day so that you're financially stable, so that you're networked and able to start looking for a job right away. You've got your resume ready, and you're focused on making sure that you can move forward. Because yes, it's going to hurt. When you get laid off, it's going to really stink, and you're going to be in a lot of pain. We're going to talk about that in our last video here, but it's not a fun situation getting laid off. But if you have prepared along the way, once you get over that initial shock, you will be ready to hit the ground running and be in a lot better place than most people who get laid off. So with that said, let's move on to the last part of this series.